Okay, folks. Bradley Knight here. Doing this audio, which is a first for me, is where I'm just going to talk. Most of the time, I'm interviewing other people, or have been interviewed by other people. So hopefully, I try and make this some sense, which I'm not very good at. Anyway, this audio is going to be about Karl Lentz. I get asked on a number of occasions what's my views on Karl Lentz, and I had a view quite early on, but I think I've got to a point now where I could probably give an opinion where people then can take a view on whether my opinion's correct or not. Be fair to say, I like him. I don't like him in a way that I know him. I've met the guy once, seen and listened to the way he talks. I think he's very arrogant, but that's by the by. That's just his persona, which everybody should respect, I suppose. And also, I met his friend Bally. Well, not friend no more, Bally. In Finchley when they were doing a lecture which I attended, which is the only lecture that I've ever been to in terms of law, or I think possibly any lecture, I suppose, or presentation, let's call it that, in their instance. So I've met them both. I had a reasonable 10-minute chat with Karl. Interesting character, like I say, a very likeable chap. And I met Bally, which I chatted to for all of a couple of minutes, who come across as very charming, uninformed, that's for sure, but very charming. And he was there doing his job on that day, which was introducing Karl to the audience. Let me just deal with that first, actually, I suppose. So a friend of mine told me about Karl being in Finchley. So I went along to this function, this presentation. It was very disjointed, very disorganised, and a complete load of nonsense, if I'm perfectly honest. I come away with learning absolutely nothing that I didn't already know, or other people could possibly ought to have known. There was no, I wouldn't say script, if you want to use that word, but there was no structure to the presentation. It was very ad hoc, and I left away disappointed for the other people, really, that were there. I went there purely, and I don't regret going, if I'm perfectly honest. I didn't pay a lot of money. I can't remember how much it was, £10, £15 maybe, or £20, I can't remember, whatever it was. I went disappointed because if I didn't learn anything, these other people who were there listening surely wouldn't have learned anything as well. So I was disappointed for that. But like I say, I don't regret going. I've never asked for a refund back from it, although if it was a proper organisation, I would have done. To be for sure, because that presentation was shit. I did ask Karl 4 questions, all of which he couldn't answer. They were very basic questions. They were not pre-prepared whatsoever. They were just questions based on what he was saying in his presentation. One specifically, which I can remember off the top of my head. I can't remember the rest, if I'm perfectly honest, but he didn't answer any of them. In that, and I actually got frustrated by the time I got to my 4th question. And one of them was about he was referring to Central London being its own separate jurisdiction in the square mile. And my question was very simple. People who know me know that I'm a building surveyor, time served, not qualified. I'm completely uneducated, to be honest. And I said to him, well, okay, fine. Okay, if this is a completely separate jurisdiction than the outer side of London in that area, I said, how can Westminster put planning laws in place in that jurisdiction? And he said, well, they can't. Well, I said, they do. Just check the planning website. And he said, well, I don't believe that to be the case. Have you got any evidence? And obviously I didn't come prepared with questions. And I said, well, Bally, who obviously is from the UK, would be able to vouch for me. And there's plenty of people around here with iPads and smartphones that could, check it out, what I'm saying. Anyway, I kind of got shrugged off, and he said, well, you need to come back to him about that. But obviously I didn't need to come back to him about it. I was just asking the question, because he's saying they are basically their own city in that square mile. Now, that's by the by, because I haven't got a clue if that's the case or not, although I know a lot of people talk about it, even people like John Harris and stuff like that state the same. Now, quite frankly, I don't care either way anyway. It's not something that I'm interested in whatsoever. So I don't explore it. But when there's people are saying stuff, it's surely worth them having some substance to say, look, this is where it's come from. This is the evidence I've got behind it. Now, I could be a bit anal sometimes, I suppose, where, I question stuff too much. But I only question what people tell me. So basically, that was that. The presentation was a bag of nails. At the end of the presentation, Barley said to the audience that was there, must have been about maybe 20, could be slightly less, could be slightly more, can't remember, I didn't count people there in this pub. And I had to leave, but he said, does anybody want to go to Queen's Bench and file claims? Now, I couldn't go because I had to go to Plymouth. So I left. But I left my number with one of the guys that went on to witness filing of claims that Karl and Bally were going to go and present on bits of paper, which apparently Karl suggests you can do. I've not seen any evidence of that either, but I could be extra critical. But everybody knows nowadays that it's your claim generally would be on an M1 claim form. That's the way site is developed. Historically, obviously, people used to, I'm going back many years now, people used to just verbalise their claims. Then that progressed on to doing it on bits of paper, but now there's forms and there's processes that are applied in law in order to get your claims heard in court. Now, I left the guy my number, and I said, can you just let me know how you get on? And he duly did. He come back to him a couple of days later, and he said that the 3 people that said they had claims to file, 2 males, 1 female, didn't get their claims filed. He said he didn't really understand why not, but there were some discussions with one of the masters at the court. But essentially what happened was, it was a tour of the court building, which a number of people were following around at court, and he was in essence a tour guide, which made no sense to me whatsoever. Having been in that court a significant amount of time, the place is an absolute maze anyway, but there is no secret Queen's Bench courtroom in a little corner somewhere. There's nothing of that sort. There's lots of mezzanines, and if people do take the opportunity, please do go, because you'll understand what the setup is. But there's old and new, lots of different floors, lots of different areas of the court. I mean, for example, in the appeals section of the court building, where I've been a number of times, they're not as nice as, say, for example, some of the masters' chambers, even though you're going before an appeals judge, which is considered higher authority than obviously the masters or high court judges that are there. that area of the building is pretty dingy, if I'm honest. But it's by the by. So essentially, no one filed any claims. They got a lovely tour of the building, by the sounds of it, and they were there till 6:30, which apparently was a bonus for them to be in a public building at 6:30. How that had any significance, I don't know. But anyway, apparently that was spoken of. Now, moving forward, so that's how I met Karl and Bally. I've listened to a couple of their videos, not many, and I say couples, probably 2 or 3. Plus I get snippets of information sent by a good friend of mine, Dean Kirby, who is a lot more technological minded than I am. So he will send me certain stuff that he reckons I should look at and listen to. Because one thing that intrigues me is obviously I want to learn as well, although I've been doing this game for a long time now. Let's go back to the UK column interview. This is where my criticism comes in as well. And my criticism is not unfounded. I'm based purely on Karl's own words. What I will say is I'm going to, in good faith, I believe he's done the things that he says. The stories he talks about, not so much, they're farcical. But basically, where he said he's got some kids back, I'm sure that's the case. I've got no reason to disbelieve that. And I'd like to think that was the case. Iron Man, I question quite a lot, to be fair, and I'll give you my reasonings shortly. But going back to the UK column interview, my criticism is Karl's timeline. Karl states social services were at the birth of his child. Maybe not the same day, birth date, or possibly the next day, but he says they were there. Why they were there has never actually been explained, and I'm not too sure if people have asked that question, because in my experience, social services don't sit in birthing wards. There's normally a precursor issue to why they're there. People who know me will know I'm not a fan of social services whatsoever. One thing I do know, my children are both 13 and 14. I've got one child is 13, one child is 14. I've never had social services involved in my family life whatsoever from birth to now, and never wish them to be involved. He explains that the reason why they're there is to offer him benefits for his Down syndrome child, which obviously having a Down's child is I sympathise with that. So I find that kind of odd. Is why they're even there in the first place. There's obviously, well, I say obviously, not always the case, to be honest, in my experience of social services, but there's got to be a reason why they were there. There's got to be a trigger point from somebody saying something to somebody to have them there. I'm trying to move on as fast as I can, but in the interview he states the social services expressed, okay, then you don't want our benefits, then we're going to protect the child and we're going to take the child, which they duly did. And he said, well, you can't touch or take my property. I've redacted this slightly, and I'm trying to do this verbatim. This interview was a long time ago. Can't remember precisely when, but I'm sure you can recheck your YouTube UK column website, type in Karl Lentz. Anyway, so then he says to his partner, wife, girlfriend, whatever, at the time, he says, well, are you my property? She said, yes, apparently. And he then says to her, am I your property? She says, yes, apparently. On that point, what am I trying to think of? Sorry, I fucking lost my train of thought. And so he says, yes. And then he says, in that interview, he says, well, to social services, if you're going to take my property, you're going to have a lot of fun with me. Now, stop there. That assumes, at that point, in that birthing suite, he had knowledge that he can use the word property in court in relation to his child. I would never use that word, perfectly honest, in relation to my child. because I don't deem my child as my property, and I don't think my child would deem me as her property. She is a living natural being, and is definitely cannot be derived as property in my opinion. But I could completely be mistaken. I'll be perfectly honest as well. In any court experience that I've had, I've never, and especially family court, and again, people who know me will know I'm in the family courts quite a bit as a Mackenzie friend, and I've never described a child as property. It just doesn't seem appropriate, but I could be completely mistaken on that point. But anyway, be that as it may, his property got taken, using his words. Now, what he then goes on to say is that he then spent 5 years in litigation, employing a torrent of lawyers, spending lots of money, ended up living in a shipping container, spending lots of times in the law library, in order to try and get his child back. And he got his child back eventually, 6 years later, for whatever reason. But this is where I think he made his balls up, because if you think about it, if he knew day one that all he needed to do was go to court and say, I require the restoration of my property, why did he not do that day one from the day his child was taken? Why not day 2? Why not day 3? Why not day 4? Why did it then take him to employ a bunch of lawyers who have probably ponched a lot of money off him? Why did he not just say to the lawyers then as well, I need you to go into court and ask the court to give me the restoration of my property? Why didn't he do that? The honest fact is, he didn't. He didn't do that. And he got his child back 6 years later. Now, he also said in his one of his interviews that the protective order in relation to where the child was in place with didn't even relate to the people that had custody of his child at the time. Now, I may be reading 2 and 2 as 5, but I would aver and suggest that quite possibly he exposed the fact that paperwork was flawed, and that's how he got his children back. Now, I could be completely mistaken, and Karl could correct it by showing his paperwork. Now, I'm not even asking him to, because quite frankly, I'm not interested. The good news is he's got a child back, although I believe he's placed it with another family member. So that's very questionable in terms of the approach he employed in that instance, because being a dad, I know for a fact I will without any equivocation whatsoever get my children back, whatever it takes. That's for sure. If that happened to me, and I'd be seriously questioning why social services are there in the first place and why they'd want to provide me benefits. I mean, some of the cases I deal with, people struggle to even get a benefit, let alone being offered benefits. So it's just a bit suspect. Okay, I'm a man. This is the argument that Karl puts forward, or the position, if you want to call it that. I'm a man. Now, my personal opinion is, it's fucking obvious that I'm a man. Karl, I would deem a man. He looks like a man. And Barley looks like a man to me. And I think a judge, if you go before them and say, I'm a man, he would say, okay. And then the room's going to be silent. Now, in addition to that, being a man does not give you any superior authority over another man. It doesn't. But I think what Karl's alluding to in his argument is that man created the court, man employed the judiciary, and he's saying that gives you that upper tier standing over those very same people that you're employing. However, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't. It's a bit like government, for example. If you work on the premise that most of the people in the UK don't vote, but somehow government acts for the people that do vote and also don't vote. So if you apply that same principle to I'm a man and I've got authority over you, well, do you have authority over government? Now, the thing is, what you can do is question government, and you can question the court's opinions. That's basically where your authority derives from. But then it's the same as anybody. It's the same as a child. I mean, people believe they have inalienable rights and alike. That may or may not be the case. I don't know. I've got my opinion on that. But so the whole premise that you can walk into court and say, I'm a man, and stand there with significant authority over a judge or the judiciary is a fallacy. It's a complete joke, and I feel sorry for the people that believe by saying I'm a man is going to help you out in the judicial process. But however, I do believe that a man has more authority over a corporation. However, the judiciary doesn't. They have equal standing. So you got to remove that from your mind. Now, flipping the court is another one. There's no such thing as flipping the court. You can't flip the court. You can't suddenly have one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction. So that is a complete fallacy in itself. I'd love to see evidence of where you can flip a court. I can't imagine, even to the clerks that I know, I'd go to and say, do you understand what flipping the court means? They would give me a response to say, oh yeah, that means this. Look in this book. There's no such thing. Claims. Criminal claims won't stand under civil. Now, Karl suggests that if you get a criminal claim, you make your own claim back on them. But that provides no protection for either or side. It just ain't going to happen. One does not stand under another. That definitely is not the case. Next, dictionary. This dictionary business. Everybody can access a dictionary on the web free of charge, and also buy your traditional dictionary. Now, they've written their own dictionary, which apparently is the cause of great dispute between Karl and Bally. What I will tell you is that dictionary will have no legal standing in court whatsoever. It has no benefit to you. All it is a different interpretation, I imagine. I've not seen it. I've seen the cover of the words which they're applying in that book. So it's completely useless if you're looking to use it in legal land. So it's as good as toilet paper. So don't buy it. What's the point? Just go on the internet and look at interpretations. And interpretations constantly change anyway. And how these people are experts in providing interpretations is beyond me. I think there's probably an argument there that mis-selling what they're providing in that. So that's another consideration. Now, one thing I've noticed with Karl and Bally, Karl talks in analogies, talks in stories, and gives ridiculous examples in relation to legal arguments. What if you do this? What if you say that? What if you do this? Now, that's all well and good, but in law, or in the courtroom environment, you can't use those analogies. I mean, they make perfect sense of barroom talk. Then what you've got here is the newly involved Bally, who, to be fair, I just don't understand what the guy's doing. He has no reasonable experience whatsoever in the courtroom environment. I would suggest he's had some courtroom experience based on his prior convictions. Karl has clearly had some, that's for sure. That I don't doubt. But Bally just talks in riddles, and I'm fed up with hearing in some of the videos that I've been sent his circular analogies and examples he provides to arguments put forward by just general people or claims made against people to the people he's assisting. I cannot see any benefit that man can provide anybody. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet by any means, but he clearly lacks a common sense approach, and also lacks real court experience. And I would allude to say also Karl lacks significant courtroom experience, but I could be completely mistaken on that. I don't know. So I apologise if that's the case, but that's just the impression that I get. Now, going back to Barley and Karl said in one of his interviews that he come to the UK under Barley's request under false pretences. He said basically he got told Barley or his dad, jointly or severally, had a couple of charges, and that's why he wanted him over. And he was going to do a couple of talks, but his stay got extended. Now, I'm thinking as an advocate, the first thing, Karl then said he went to court and found out they had a bunch of charges, jointly or severally, I don't know. A bunch of charges. Now, as an advocate, I'm thinking logically, why would you not ask, before going into the courtroom, which is the first time he alleges that he found out about these charges, can I have a copy of the charge sheet? Can I see your paperwork? Because if you go in, I'm as a man, which is nonsense, but even if you do that, you're going to want to know what you're up against. Surely. You're going to know what you're up against. That's the first thing I would ask of any case, is show me your paperwork. Let's have a look at what we're dealing with. Yet Karl says he arrived at court, and it wasn't the date of his arrival to the UK, it was a couple of days later, or a week later or something like that. I can't quite remember. Yeah, I think it was a few days later, I can't quite remember. He says he turned up at court and found out there's a whole host of charges against Barley and his dad, or either or, whichever, not too sure which. But my point being, any credible advocate would want to know what's been filed already and what they're facing that day. Because how would you even know that's a hearing date for a criminal prosecution? How would you know? It could be a plea hearing, or it could be a mention hearing, or it could be a case management hearing. It could be any of those things. So why would you not ask that question? Any, like I say, credible advocate would ask that question. So I kind of suspect that Karl hasn't got as much experience as he alludes to. But like I say, I believe both Barley and Karl seem to be very nice people. But sadly, are taking people down the wrong path. And I've got five cases where people have gone in to court, going in the route that Karl describes down, saying, I'm a man, where I've had to pick up the pieces. Now, I don't necessarily blame Karl or Barley for that, but what I do blame them for is to giving people misinformation, and that's fact. Because it just doesn't work. One thing I will give Karl credit for, because I'm sure he has done some good work out there, and I'm sure he's a good person, is that he's explained to people, keep it simple, and that's very much been my policy to date. Very much been my policy to date, is you keep everything short and sweet as you possibly can, and don't be clever. Don't be clever. And I think you should appreciate Karl for that. In terms of the way that I believe and he believes you should present your cases and your defences. But the way I go about it is very different, to be fair. And people who know me will know how I present my cases. in a sort of very different fashion, but I do keep it as short as possible. Apart from that, that's pretty much my view on Karl Lentz. I wouldn't rely on Iron Man. I could completely be wrong. All I can tell you, I've got 5 cases of people who've gone into court and who have watched these DVDs. I've not watched any of them, and basically failed and ended up with costs against them. Where most of my cases, especially in criminal, and to be fair, a lot of them are low level crimes. There's only a few Crown Court cases that I've dealt with for the last 10 years. Most of them are all low level stuff. They end up with no conviction whatsoever, without the need for having these sort of issues with the court, saying that you're a man, and to be honest, the court's just not even going to understand what you're on about. And I've seen it, I've witnessed it. That's really it. So good luck, and I'm sure you'll hopefully get something from this video. Unfortunately, I'm not giving you any answers and moving forward, but the future videos hopefully will give you some answers.